Most of us have heard of Mount Hermon. We're pretty familiar with the story of how the fallen angels met on top of this mountain. They rebelled against God by signing an oath and agreeing to sleep with the women on earth. This mountain is also the location of Jesus' transfiguration. But what most people are not familiar with is the absolute demonic activity that occurred at the base of this mountain and that centered around an opening to the underworld, aka the gates of hell. Now, to get a better visual, this is where Mount Hermon is located. So it kind of straddles the borders between Lebanon and Syria. And in my opinion, if there was one single earthly location where evil originated, this would be it. Again, this is where the fallen angels met. The first ones to follow Satan, the origin of where demonic activity comes from. This is their first meeting place. This is where they signed an oath, defied God, and decided to mate with women. And from that interaction is where we get the Nephilim, where we get the giants, and where we get demonic spirits. It is, after all, called Mount Baal Hermon in the Bible on multiple occasions because they knew what happened on this mountaintop. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So right at the base of this mountain is Caesarea Philippi, which you and I have heard before from the Bible, otherwise known as Banyas. And this area was widely known for its pagan demonic rituals, pagan demonic sacrifices. This entire area was just demonic, and it was well known for it. Why? Because right at the base of this mountain, there is a cave. And this cave was known to be an opening to the underworld, or the gates of Hades. I want to pause for a second and look at the biblical history of this area because it's not only significant to the story, it's absolutely fascinating. Why? Because it contains stories of giants. Now, this area that we're focusing on, this Mount Hermon, Golan Heights area, on the left you'll see the biblical map of this area, and it was called Bashan. Now, this area was a part of the promised land that Moses and the Israelites were headed into. And this is also an area where they conquered and annihilated the giants that were residing there. And we see this in Joshua 12. And the territory of Og, king of Bashan, one of the last of the Rephites. Now, I don't know how to correctly pronounce this. I did look this up, and I got like 3 different pronunciations. It is the descendants of the Rephaim, which are the giants. It's interesting, in Deuteronomy, it even tells us about his bed and how big it was. It was decorated with iron and was more than 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide. So that's almost 14 feet long and 6 feet wide. They also conquered the Amorites, and we learned from Amos, it says, "Yet I destroyed the Amorites before them, though they were tall as the cedars and strong as the oaks." And this is also why when Moses sent spies out into the promised land to look at kind of what they were going to deal with, the spies came back and were like, Moses, we have no chance. And they didn't get to enter the promised land because they doubted God's power and God's ability to help them fight these giants. Now, this is the same area directly below Mount Hermon, and for generations following, this area continued to be the central location for demonic pagan ritual worship. They would build temples and altars to their false gods, and it all centers around that top red circle there. You'll notice at the top it says the Grotto of Pan. Pan was a demonic pagan god that they worshipped, and they worshipped him because they believed he came out of the underworld, and that underworld was from a cave that was in the rock at the base of Mount Hermon. Now, this is what it looks like today, and you can go and visit this. I guess at some point in history, there was a massive earthquake that changed the shape or the structure of this cave, but it was known to be the abyss. There was no depth to it. They could not measure it. It was just bottomless. You can go visit this area and see how much is left of these temples, of these shrines that were built around this entrance to the underworld, around these gates of hell.
On our tour, we'll visit sites from the Hellenistic period, the 2nd century BC, and as late as the Crusader period. This is where the ancient temple of Pan was. They would place the idols in these niches. There's even a Greek inscription underneath. And another idol would be placed here. Maybe a third one here. And there's another Greek inscription on both sides. You can see how it's carved in the rock. Here, Herod's son, Philippus, established the seat of his rule here, calling the town Caesarea Philippi. However, the name Panias caught on, and Banias it remains until today.
The city known as Caesarea Philippi in Jesus' time was originally established by Alexander the Great as a countryside shrine to the Greek god Pan. I'll show you him in a second. And then Herod built a city there, and after Herod, his son Philip expanded the size of the city and renamed it Caesarea Philippi. Now this is the Greek god Pan that they were worshiping at that time, half goat, half man. And it always goes back to Enoch, when the giants, when they got bored with men, they started to mate and breed with the animals, and it created these half human, half animal demonic hybrids that we see all throughout history. Similar to the pagan god Moloch that a lot of people today still sacrifice to. Up at the top, the cult center was devoted to the god Pan, the half-man, half-goat god of fright or panic. The site featured a cave grotto and carved niches for the statues of deities. Beginning in the 3rd century BC, worshippers cast sacrifices into the cave as offerings to Pan. Now, just like Jesus' transfiguration on the top of Mount Hermon showed his triumph over the evil that previously resided on that mountain, just 6 days prior, Jesus took his disciples to the location of this cave. He took them there, and they would have all known that this was commonly known to be the entrance to the underworld. It was commonly known to be a demonic location. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the Son of Man is?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus says, "And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it." Jesus did this on purpose. He knew what this area was. He knew it was demonic. He stood in front of the opening to the underworld. He stood in front of the gates of hell and declared his triumph over evil. He and the disciples are literally standing at the place known in ancient times as the gates of Hades, or the underworld. Jesus is saying, in other words, that he will conquer the forces of darkness associated with the underworld, and that the power of the church will overcome them. In Paul's words, Christ disarmed the rulers and the authorities. He made a display of them in public, triumphing over them by it. I thought I would end with this. So if you go on Google Earth, you can see obviously Caesarea Philippi and the Temple of Pan, or the dancing goats, right next to each other, and there's Mount Hermon. So there's absolutely nothing on top of Mount Hermon except one little building. And you'll see it right there. Absolutely nothing else in this area but this one little observatory. And who owns this observatory? Well, for that, we look on the roof. There are fallen angels running our world, and they have their base on the top of Mount Hermon. Coincidence? I think not.
We got the XAI data center, or supercomputer center, training from beginning installation to start of training in 19 days, which is the fastest that anyone has ever gotten a supercomputer to train.
And is that in that new building off to the side?
That's in Memphis, actually.
It's in Memphis?
Yeah.
Oh, so that's where you were?
Yeah.
I see.
Memphis,
okay.
The capital of ancient Egypt.
Right. Yeah, you're bringing what?
Perhaps that's where our new God will come from.
Yeah, no kidding.
Perhaps that's where our new God will come from.
No kidding. Yeah, I wish that was funny.